Hey there, and welcome to Undoing We, Divorce and Life Conversations on WGSN-DB, Going Solo Network, radio, podcast, and TV. I'm your host, Mardi Winder-Adams. I'm a divorce coach, a mediator, and someone who's been through exactly what you're going through. This show is all about helping you get through the tough stuff, the overwhelm of divorce, the what now moments, and the messiness of trying to rebuild your life. We're going to talk about real life challenges, share expert advice, and give you practical tools you can use to move forward with your life. Are you ready to start shifting from we to me? Grab a coffee, sit back, and let's get started. Hello, I'm so glad you're here today, and we are going to watch a video clip that is, as they say, a blast from the past. This is actually a recording I did late in 2023, so it's not that old, but I just really love the way that my guest, Kaki Perdue, talks about the emotional concept around money and divorce. Let me tell you a little bit about Kaki. She is an advice-only financial planner. She worked for a CPA firm for 10 years, and she also led the mentoring program there. And then she went on to spend 6 years as a chief financial officer. In 2023, Kaki launched her own business called Look Both Ways Financial, and it is an advice-only financial planning firm. We're going to learn more about that. Her practice really focuses on teaching and empowering people to understand all aspects of their money so that they feel safe, strong, and secure in making effective financial decisions. Just to let you know, Kaki is a certified financial planner and a certified public accountant. So let's listen in when we talk all about this issue of money, emotions, divorce, and how we maybe don't think fully through all of the decisions we need to make during the divorce process, so we do the right things with our money, not only in the long term, but also in the short term.
Right. So that's a good question. The advice only, the biggest selling feature for me is that I'm a fiduciary 100% of the time. And if you work with somebody that works for a firm, insert any large, investment firm name here, they might be paid a commission on investments that they put in your portfolio. They might not. They might be influenced by selling you mutual funds that their firm manages and that are proprietary to their firm, and they get paid by the firm that they're working for. So there's a much larger potential for conflict of interest. When I'm doing advice only, the biggest conflict of interest is, are we working on an hourly basis? And, how many hours is this going to take? But there's not any conflicts of interest around products that I'm recommending because I'm not receiving any kind of compensation for those products.
Right.
So I might, and I like to look at things in a goal-based manner. So what are your financial goals and how can we accomplish those goals? And then we're going to look at different ways to get there with investments and how can we do that with limited risk? So that way you're not having to take on additional risk and in a cost-effective manner. How can we do this with using perhaps low-cost index funds? Because Marty, this is the crazy thing. On Wall Street, they have all these geniuses working on these, mutual funds, right? But even with all those geniuses getting paid so much money on Wall Street, only 2 out of 10 times in any given year is the managed mutual fund going to beat the index that it's trying to that it's parallel to.
Right. Wow.
So 8 times out of 10, you're better off using a low-cost index fund. And sometimes advisors that are compensated by their large firms and they're not complete fiduciaries are not going to put you in that low-cost index fund.
Yeah. So you've used a word a couple of times that I want to just take a step back because I think I understand what it means, but I would like to hear from an expert. Fiduciary, what does that specifically mean to me as the consumer going to you when you say you have full fiduciary duty to me? What does that mean?
Yeah. So a fiduciary means that I'm legally obligated to put your best interest ahead of my own. I have to keep your best interest in mind. There's another standard out there called the suitability standard. And suitability is way less vigorous. And that if out of all the financial advisors out there, maybe 10% of them are fiduciaries, the other 90% are using the suitability standard. Suitability is more like, well, yeah, kind of. I can come up with a reason why this would sort of maybe meet your needs, and so it's quite different.
Okay. So if I go to somebody like you're obviously not yourself because you are a full fiduciary financial planner. If I went to another financial planner in any other firm, could I ask them, are you a fiduciary? Can I ask that question?
Yes, you can and you should ask that.
Okay.
And don't get me wrong, there may be perfectly good financial advisors that also take your, best interest at heart. Out there working for large firms that are also charging in a different structure than I do. But you just definitely, the best thing to ask is if they're a fiduciary.
Okay. And so I like that's an important question to ask, because we're all about being open and honest and finding the best professionals. And so again, there are, like you said, Kaki, there are great professionals that are working for big companies. There's great professionals working for small companies, and there's lousy professionals working for best of those companies. Same for attorneys, doctors, teachers, you name it. So it's really important to, do your homework and know what kind of questions to ask. So let's talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about what you actually do with people. And I believe, because you and I talked a little bit before this, it's been a couple of months now since we spoke, but I think one of the things that I was really impressed with is how you help people maybe look at setting priorities around what to do with their money or what do they want to see done with their money. And I'm thinking for people, especially for women going through the divorce process, there might be a lump sum money that comes at some point in time, either as part of the settlement or there's going to be, some kind of maybe an alimony or child support or whatever. What happens or how do you help people prioritize what they should do with that?
That is a great question. As I mentioned earlier, I like goal-based financial planning. And it helps to have have that flag of what am I working towards and why am I going to sacrifice today for that future goal? So I like goal-based planning. I like then we set up goals of how do we need this money to work for you? Do you have a emergency fund set up, and is it the right amount? And let's face it, coming out of a divorce, there's so much uncertainty and angst, and you may or may not be relaunching into a new career. The list goes on and on. So I am probably thinking that might need a larger safety fund than maybe somebody else that's been working in the same job for 20 years and feels like they have total job security. And then we will take a look at an ongoing annual spend and income and create a forward-looking intentional spending plan. A lot of people hate budgets. Budgets they stink, man. Who wants to count every dollar along the way, right?
In that divorce, you have to do that detailed budget, and it drives people crazy. Like literally, how much do you spend on toothpaste? That's almost the detail it gets down to. So yeah. So I don't like that. It's not very fun. So I prefer to do a forward-looking thoughtful spending plan, intentional, thoughtful spending plan. And it's meant to be like 85%, the 80-20 rule, get it like 80% there. So it's big picture, you need to know how much money you're bringing in, and you need to know what your fixed costs are. You need to know what the rent's going to cost, childcare if you have it, utilities. It can be an average, but we need to know these numbers. Yeah.
And once we have that big picture, then we can decide and allocate if there's discretionary funding in this pot of incoming money every month. How do we want to allocate that? Whether it's, contributing to a Roth IRA or employer-sponsored retirement plan, or maybe you want to do college savings for your children and setting up a 529 plan. We will work through, based on your goals, where we should allocate that money. And if let's say you've received a one-time big divorce settlement, then we want to be very thoughtful about when and how we're going to invest that money, because timeline matters. Yeah. If you think you might need to be spending the money anytime in the next 1, 3, even 5 years, we do not want that money in the stock market, because if we get a big correction and the market tanks 20%, it can take 3 years for the market to come back. And so that money does not belong in the stock market, period. And luckily there's other options for earning some interest along the way.
What about, and I hear this all the time with women going through divorce, and it doesn't seem to matter what their level of income is what about the feeling of, I don't have any discretionary income right now? And I'm thinking particularly during the divorce process where nothing's in place, there's no temporary orders, there's nothing. Like everybody's just kind of doing their own thing when it comes to money. What do you suggest? Should people wait until this may be kind of putting you on the spot, so I'm not asking you to give anybody legal advice or make any determination, but does it make sense to come and see you before they have a clear picture of what that divorce settlement might look like, or what, a lump sum payment might look like, or what assets they're going to pull out of the divorce? Or does it make more sense to wait until they have a clearer picture and then go and talk to you about what to do next?
Well, it's always helpful to know ahead of time if they're expecting a settlement. We can do some simple things, even as just setting them up a brokerage account, and which is a smart way to plop the money in. And brokerage accounts right now, you can invest in a money market fund and be earning around 5%. So that way you have a holding spot for that money to land that's even going to earn you some interest in the interim period. I think it's also helpful to have a plan ahead of time. It's always better to plan first and then adjust as you go along. It can be real easy to spend some of that money that comes in from the settlement in maybe not the smartest way, because let's face it, when we're coming out of a divorce, and I've never been through a divorce, but I have friends that have, and relatives. If you're coming out of a divorce, sometimes you're not thinking clearly and you're loaded down with tons of emotions, and it's just tough. So having a plan ahead of time can help sometimes prevent unforced errors.
Yeah, you've got a really neat term that you used the last time that we spoke about, and that's revenge spending. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it's funny. I have another picture. We'll talk about revenge spending too, but I want you to imagine that you have a backpack on and 2 suitcases, and you're standing on a boat, and the backpack and suitcases are loaded with really important stuff. And something happens and you end up in the water, and you still have your backpack and suitcases. If you're going to survive, you have to let go of those suitcases to swim. And you have to let go in order to swim. Well, now imagine that the backpack is the divorce and the suitcases are the emotional baggage that come along with the divorce. It could be disappointment, it could be anger, it could be sadness, any range of emotions.
Sure.
As you exit that divorce, to really thrive, you need to be able to let go of those suitcases so that you can swim. And revenge spending, if you don't let go of those suitcases, then guess what can pop up is revenge spending. And it's because I'm not feeling enough I feel sad, I feel lonely, I feel what, insert emotion here. Because I don't feel enough, then I'm going to overspend and go spend too much. And that can come in the form of handbags or cars or jewelry or, whatever. You're spending because it's the emotional outlet.
Yeah.
So being able to recognize that is huge. And it's okay to feel the emotions. Of course, you're going to feel the emotions. So learning to avoid that, if you can avoid that revenge spending, that's amazing. And part of it is learning to drop those emotional suitcases so you can swim.
Yeah. And I appreciate that because I honestly work with my clients a lot on that, is how to get rid of those emotions, because that does happen. I have worked with people who have bought condos in different states that they don't even particularly like visiting that state. They got, somebody has presented this opportunity to make this fantastic investment in this condo that's going to be an Airbnb, and they've spent like $250,000 in a partnership in this condo, and they're never going to see that money again. They're not going to be able to get it back, and it's just like gone, because now they're in with another group of people who don't want to sell. So then they got to find somebody to buy them out. It's just, oh my gosh, I've heard so many horror stories about this kind of stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. And it's sort of the same with, obviously, when you're going through a divorce, you're also going through a tremendous loss. If somebody loses a parent or a spouse, or if they have a death and they've lost a close loved one, we recommend not spending any money, not spending money is not right, not making any major financial decisions, selling a house, buying a condo, for at least 9 months.
Right.
Because you need time for your brain to settle back into, okay, this is my new normal.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that for a lot of women, and I think that's where like divorce coaching can really help, is letting people know this is going to happen after the divorce. This is normal. You're going to experience, you're going to have this yo-yo emotion. You're going to have this kind of sense of like your whole world just shifts like overnight. And all of a sudden, you're going from maybe a 2-income, fairly affluent financial situation as a couple to a single parent, 1-income, far less affluent, because divorce hurts both sides. Nobody gets rich during the divorce in most cases. So both partners see a drop in that income. So definitely.
That's right. I have one more comment on that too, Marty, to add on. If you come out of the divorce and you end up with a bucket of credit card debt, I think the best thing is, like, don't beat yourself up. Say to yourself, okay, this is my starting point. This is my step 0. And this is now my responsibility. And I know I'm capable of handling this. And what are the steps I need to do to move forward?
Right.
But you don't have to beat yourself up if you overspend and make mistakes. Just own it. Own it. Say, yep, I did that when I was not in my best self, and move on and figure out a way to move forward.
Yeah. And one thing I have noticed, Kaki, and I don't know, I don't certainly work with people at the financial depth that you do. I'm more superficial, but credit card companies, especially since COVID, seem to be a lot more accommodating. If you go to them and you say, hey, I've got this problem, I've been through a divorce, can we work on a repayment plan? They seem to be, and I'm not just saying broad sweep every single credit card company, but most of my clients seem to be getting a more positive response from them, as opposed to before it was like, no, that's your payment schedule. These are the penalties. These are the fines. Pay it.
It's always worth a phone call to ask.
Yeah.
It never hurts to ask. And credit card companies have to spend a lot of money to bring in new customers. So if they can keep you as a customer, and if you can be nice to them on the phone and let them know that you like working with them, that you've been a long-time customer, that you want to stay with them, and you want to have a lower interest rate, they may say yes.
That's what I was going to say. A lot of them are willing to drop that interest rate, sometimes by, a few percentage, which makes a big difference if you've got a big credit card debt. So it is worth looking into. I just love the way that Kaki explained a lot of those concepts in a way that really I hadn't even thought about before. And I think it's always refreshing when somebody is able to break down really complicated things with the numbers into very simple and strategic ways that we can approach these issues. So I'd like to highlight 5 points that I feel are really critical to keep in mind if you are dealing with financial decisions prior to the divorce, during the divorce, or after the divorce. So the first one is, if you're going to work with an advisor, make sure they are a fiduciary. So that means that as a fiduciary, they have to put your legal and financial interests ahead of their own. So in other words, they are not just going to recommend specific products that their company, organization, firm, whatever is selling. Now, that is important because obviously, if you work for a specific company and you're only allowed to offer whatever plans or programs or options that company offers, it may not give you the big picture view of, what's possible in the market. And therefore you may end up settling for some kind of a financial option that maybe is not going to get you as much or potentially has more risks than something else that may be out there. So remember, just ask if they are a fiduciary. And that doesn't mean that somebody who's not a fiduciary is a bad choice. It just means that you need to be aware that they may have a limit. They may be limited to what they offer, and they may have a conflict in interest in because they're getting commissions on one product, or they're getting, some kind of quid pro quo for selling a specific financial option. Make sure that you are looking at prioritizing global-based planning. And I really like that. So really looking at a big picture roadmap and assessing what are your needs, what is your comfort level, what's your risk tolerance, and more importantly, what do you need to have at the end of the day so that you are in a good financial space? Because the last thing you want to do is have money in the divorce. I'm sure we've all done this. I know I've done it, where you've got some kind of a windfall, even if it's just a small amount, like a bonus or an unexpected payment, or maybe a small inheritance, or maybe a big inheritance. And you've done some things with that money that are not in your best interests. And then once you make some of those decisions, you can't always undo them. Build an emergency fund. I think this is really important. Lots of financial planners talk about emergency funds, but I think after divorce, when you are going to be solely responsible for your own financial management, it's really important to have one in place. And like Kaki says, make it a robust emergency fund. Don't go with the bare minimum. Make sure that you have enough in there that if the car breaks down, if heaven forbid you suddenly find yourself unemployed, or your spouse stops paying support payments, or your ex-spouse stops paying child support or alimony payments, that you have enough cushion that you can, you're not going to be immediately looking at dire financial situations. That whole idea of revenge spending. So we know that emotions play a big part in money. We know that emotions also tend to drive our spending habits. So being aware that after divorce, post-divorce, and during divorce is going to be a very emotional time, and just managing your spending. And, that means not just spending on frivolous stuff, but also maybe investing, because you want to make sure that you have a sound financial picture and you are making the decisions based on knowledge, information, and education around what you're spending your money on or what you're investing in. Because once it's gone in a lot of cases. You can't just bring it all back. You can't undo some of these things. I had a client who invested a lot of money in 401k. Like and that's a good, right? Investing in a 401k is good, but she didn't stop and take a long-term picture look. And she actually she could have better used some of that money to put for a down payment on a home and dropped her mortgage rate because at the time she did the investment, she would actually come out farther ahead by putting more as a lump sum on her new property rather than putting that maximum investment into that 401k. And again, talking to somebody who knows what questions to ask you and that not trying to sell you anything or not trying to get you to invest in anything is really going to help get clarity around those things. And the last thing that I think is important is it is critical to acknowledge when you don't know what you don't know. And I have said this a million times. I will continue to say this. When people start asking me a lot about financial questions, I refer to people like Kaki, like other financial planners and CDFAs, tax accountants, whoever it may be that's going to best be able to advise the client on what they specifically need. And you can start asking those questions at any point in time. Don't wait until the divorce is over to ask about this. Start looking for what are your best interests and what are you going to do to most effectively maximize your returns on whatever money you get during the divorce settlement. I hope this has been helpful. I know every time I listen to Kaki and other financial planners and advisors and professionals, I do find that I'm learning a lot more. So something we can all do. Thanks for sharing your time with me on Undoing We. If this episode resonated with you, be sure to share it with a friend and don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. If you're looking for some more support, be sure to grab my guide, 5 Strategies for Better Communication During Divorce and Other Life Transitions. The link is going to be in the show notes. And remember, no matter what you do today, do something special for yourself.